Because when I went through Holdfast, there was only 3 guys. We were getting all the hands-on training. You've seen the movies, like the psychiatrist where you lay down on the couch? It would be like that.
That's cool, though.
They'd pay attention to exactly what was going on, so I got the right help. What'd you go to school for?
Well, I have a master's degree in psychopharmacology and addiction therapy. I'm a couple years away from a PhD, but...
you're still doing school.
I think I might get another master's in forensic psychology. I want to know more about the pathology between the criminal mind and just how it plays into everyday society. So I want to learn more about that. Everybody comes into recovery and, they have this desire to get clean in the interim, right? In the very beginning. And so they come in and they're just like, so thankful to be here and just I need this. I got to change my life. They get some food in their belly. They get some, some good night's sleep, right? They got a bed, shower, camaraderie, and a few weeks in, I got this. They get clean. Their levels kind of, level out a little bit, and they detox, and they're like, I got this. I'm going to take off. And so there's times where we have to get them in there and talk them off the ledge. Just be like, hey, you don't got this. Albeit for me to tell anybody they're going to relapse, But, and my hope is always to be proved wrong on that. But it's one of those things where so many times they just, they feel like they understand what all they need to know.
I used to be like that too. I mean, I know how it is. I'm sure that we all were like that when you just go to detox. You just show up at a detox and you're there for 2 or 3 days and you're like, I got this. Like, I already know how it's gonna go when I leave. And as soon as you walk out of the door, all of a sudden you just feel like this wave of like, oh, I got my phone back. I got and then you start dwelling on little things and you're like, oh man, I'll just do it once. Yeah. And that's all it takes.
That's it. It's all it takes. And so we talk to these guys and I'll tell them all the time, hey, you got to understand something. It's easy to stay clean in a structured environment like this. You have accountability. You got random UAs. You got fellowship of guys that can know, that have all done it. And so they know what they're looking at. And you have this accountability. This is recovery and rehab is literally preparation for what happens when you get out of rehab. Because it's the jumping off point. It's the catalyst to your new life, right? This is take time, learn about yourself. So let me tell you an example. When I got to prison, this guy sits me down and I'm a couple weeks in and the enormity of the situation is hitting me, like where I'm at and the amount of time. Because I got sentenced to 11 and a half years in prison. And I'm in my early 20s and I'm sitting there raking rocks for 10 cents an hour in San Luis, which is, from my cell, I can see the Mexican flag flying. That's how close it is to the border, right? And this guy sits down and he says, hey, he goes, how many times in your life do you think that you're ever going to be completely uprooted from society and all outside influences and external stimuli? You don't have no parents. You don't have no wife. You ain't got no kids to deal with. You ain't got no job. You don't have any of that stuff. To be put into a situation, albeit as sucky as this one, to only learn about yourself. Right? He's like, you could go and get political in here and get all your tattoos and, and do your drugs and all that stuff. Or you can go over to that library over there and you can learn what put you here. Because for 86% of people in this nation, when you enter into the system, it's a revolving door for the rest of your life. It's literally in and out, in and out, in and out. And like the 12-step program says, jails, institutions, and death. And it just, the reason that saying is around because it stood the test of time. Because for such a high percentage, that's what happens to people. And so I tell the guys all the time, hey man, you're here. And we hope that they come in on their own free will. But in the admissions process, you're looking at maybe 8 out of 10 clients. Somebody else is calling for them. It's a wife calling, I got to get my husband in. It's a mom saying, my son's fighting for his life. I got to get my son in. Okay, well, let me talk to your husband. Why? What for? What? No. I know. No. But I need to see where your husband's willingness is. Right? Is somebody coming in because they want to be there and they want to make those changes? 8 out of 10 times, it's not the case. But when they get there, what we hope to do is get them into this transformative state of mind where they're like, hey, there are better things for me out there. And so I try to instill in them when they first get there, hey, come in here. I don't care if you're here for your mom, if you're here for your wife, if you're here for probation and they're making you jump through hoops, it's either this or go to jail and you chose this as the lesser of the evils. You're here. So do what you can to make the best out. Learn what you can. There's a thing called neurocropping, right? So that's your brain when you go to sleep at night. All the day's activities, it gets rid of what it doesn't need and it stores the rest, right? Neurocrop what you don't need and take the rest. And just do every day to try to be better than the day before, right? And just learn. Just open your mind, humble yourself enough to learn. Hopefully Holdfast we can plant seeds. They might not get watered at Holdfast, but we're hoping that those seeds will get watered down the road. And that's the whole reason why I can go to bed every single night fulfilled. I literally can go to work every day and go home and sleep knowing that I helped provide an environment to guide somebody to a better life down the road, right?
Yeah, I just got to that point where I wanted it for myself, even though the week before I got in there, I was all about using. But once I got there, I just realized, I can't go back. This is probably my last chance. If I even try it again, I know I'll die. Yeah. And a lot of the younger guys that were in there with us, they had that same mentality of I'll be fine when I get out. They were in there for 2 weeks and then they wanted to leave and go home and they thought they were going to be okay. And as soon as I saw that, I decided to try and help them in any way I could by saying, no, listen, while we're here, this is a fun time. Because you were probably just at home isolating, or you're probably, no one wanted you around. Now all of a sudden you got a whole group of friends that want you here and understand you, and they have relatable problems that you have. And so you're in a place where you belong right now. And so just take this time for yourself and learn from that. And when I did that when I was at Holdfast, I think that's what really clicked for me.
Yeah, that's one of the things we really are proud of is the fellowship, because we try to create an environment where it's not everybody's an individual, everybody's a number, right? Everybody has a name and everybody has their own unique story. We don't try to put a severity or a hierarchy on somebody's worse than others. Everybody's in here for the same common denominator, right? And there's other factors in their baggage or their past or whatever they're dealing with, whether it's anxiety, co-occurring, right? Depression. There's a lot of things that people have to work out. And individually in those rooms, we work those out. But what is fellowship? I mean, when those guys get together in the group therapy room, what is that? It's gaining strength by sharing weakness. That's really what it's all about. Hey man, be humble, be vulnerable enough to say, hey, I struggle with this.
It's hard to teach a group of young guys vulnerability or the importance of it. Mm-hmm. When I realized that it was going to work for me, vulnerability, I just decided to lay everything out there because I didn't know what was really wrong with me. I knew there was some stuff wrong, but there was also things I didn't know that was wrong with me that I found out while I was there. Yeah. And so just talking about this stuff will sort of unlock everything, and it'll free up that trauma in your brain to where you think that of something in your past and you're scared to even think about it. Once you do that and you start talking about it more, it just becomes a memory. It's manageable.
And it's we'll deal with guys. Speaking of trauma, we'll deal with I do EMDR therapy with the guys, and guys will come in and they just, especially first responder clients, they'll come in and they've just seen so much, right? And so they just want to disassociate from that feeling. And so we'll work around the feelings around certain incidences, and we'll help them to just process that through. trauma is it's an event, or it's emotions that are just 100% stored in the emotional side of the brain, and they're just stuck there, right? So what we do is we have them go through the desensitization with bilateral stimulation, and they unlock that, and their brain just, we're predispositioned from a cellular standpoint to just heal ourselves. That's, if you get a cut on your arm and you clean it and you put that Neosporin and the Band-Aid on there, it's going to heal, right? It's Wolverine type stuff, right? Like it heals itself. Your brain is predisposed to do that same thing. That's the eye movement at nighttime, the REM, the REM sleep. That's what that's bilateral stimulation. Your brain is processing when you're sleeping. That's why sleep is so healthy. And they process through that trauma. We get them into the rooms and they're like, man, I saw this and I saw that. Okay, well, let's talk about that. And there's, MDR will take you to a next level past talk therapy or psychoeducation, right? And so Holdfast is super well-rounded in the trauma therapy department, as well as the group therapy, individual sessions twice a week. It's such a blessing to work in a place where fellowship, Christian principles, It's all the foundation of what we do, and we don't micromanage them. That's the thing, is a lot. It's not militant. There's rules and there's expectations, but there's not this, okay, you have to eat this, or you have to do this, or go to bed at this time, TV's off at 10. We let them be men. I mean, they're grown men. We let them be men. We just have expectations that's the same for everybody, understanding everybody's situation is different. But man, the things that guys see in there, like they're making friendships that'll last a long time, because everybody's in there suffering from the same thing.
I did. And going back to EMDR real quick, that was the one thing I went to treatment for in the past that I never got, that I got when I was at Holdfast. And we created a timeline from,
timeline?
From even pre-birth. And I was like, how could pre-birth, how could I know? But then it was like, what happened? What household were you born into? Like, how was your parents, like their marriage and everything while, before you were born. And I went back and I just started picking apart things, and I really took advantage of the one-on-one counseling.
The guys get a lot out of the whole program. It's the activity level, the CrossFit, the gym. I mean, it's healthy from the whole biopsychosocial element. So we help them to get healthy, provide an environment that allows them to get healthy internally, externally, emotionally, spiritually. So they're well-rounded, once again, when they leave Holdfast, because that's really where the rubber meets the road, right? Easy to stay clean in treatment. When you get out there and you realize, hey, I don't have a random UA today, or hey, I don't have to check in at a certain time or be here at a certain time. That's really when your decision-making, your time management, your frustration tolerance, all of that, coping mechanisms, all those cliche terms that you hear in treatment, that's when all that plays a part, man.
90 days, I think, is about the minimum of what we need. I know you hear about 30-day treatment centers, 60-day. I don't know how anyone could pull it off if they've been using drugs for a long time or alcohol for a long time or whatever it is that they're in treatment for. That 90-day period, I feel like after you have done the work in your one-on-one stuff and in your groups, and you've gone through that 3 months, that there's a point where you think, hey, I don't think I need to go back to using because I've done the work, and it starts to not be as worth it as it was.
Right.
But for me, what worked for me is I stayed around another 3 months in sober living, and so I started doing little checkpoints, like I got a job, and then money, getting a paycheck is a trigger for some guys sometimes. Sure. So I got a job, and I was still getting the UAs and everything, and I got a car. I still was, I just had to gradually do it rather than just diving into the deep end out of treatment, and taking it slower this time. That really paved the way for my success. I've been sober for about 17 months now, thanks to the format that Holdfast had.
Right. We try to tell the guys, hey, here's the deal. Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So, they come in and they get that first couple weeks, they got 14, 15 days of sobriety. And a lot of times guys will get this, okay, I can do this now. But like you were saying, that slow process, the 90 days, you got to think, if you're doing a 30-day program, that's 4 hours of individual counseling if you see them once a week. That's 4 hours. So if you've been doing drugs for 15 or 20 years and you come in for 30 days, you can get a great head start. You can get a great start, but that 90 days, so me and Brendan, we went on this 4-month, 5-month marketing thing where we wanted community outreach, right? We wanted to get, we wanted to meet churches, and we went out and we met and we sat down with counselor upon counselor, Christian counselor in churches, and because we like to see that continuum of care. So you come in for 90 days, and if you have to leave at that point, we don't want to have you come from a, say, toxic environment into a structured, healthy environment, learn what you need to learn, put in all this work, and then you graduate and then go right back to that toxic environment. We want to plug you in somewhere, wherever you're at. So if you say, oh yeah, okay, where do you live? Oh, I live in Tempe. Okay, what part of Tempe? Oh, rural in Maine. We want to be able to, hey man, the 3rd Street Baptist Church is right down the street from you. We know the pastor. We'll give him a call, let him know that you're getting out, plug in with him, right? And we didn't want to have somebody that wanted to continue on with, say, weekly counseling. We didn't want to be just familiar with a counselor in Anthem if you lived in Chandler. So you got to drive 45 minutes one way once a week to get to a counselor. We want to have a counselor that we trust, that understands what we do. We understand what she does. Boom, plug them in. less than a mile from their house. So we spent 5 months just traveling all down in the valley, getting to know people so we can plug people in. Because like you were saying, that team of care is huge. 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. They learn, they unpack, they get healthy, physically, spiritually, reconnect with God, whatever that looks like for them. That sober living piece is huge because it's accountability. Like you're saying, that money. Man, somebody goes right back home, they get a job, and they have all this money, and it's like, wait a minute. What do I do?
Yeah.
We want that accountability is key, man. That fellowship, staying connected, it's huge. Don't isolate. Don't go back to those negative nouns, people, places, things, right? Have a place that you can connect, get in service work. That's a big one, too. Service work's a big one, too.
That's why I stayed. That's why I stayed here. I knew I couldn't go back to the cage that I was from because it was just too toxic. It was not... There's no way I could go back to that and make it work for me. As soon as I would show up to my old city, I would feel like, this wave of uncomfortability.
When did you know that? How far into treatment did you become aware of that? Because getting guys to have that kind of awareness of, I know I can't go back. So my grandfather used to tell me all the time, when you're wise, what is the definition of wisdom? The definition of wisdom is the correct use of knowledge, right? So when I tell guys, so what do you know? Let's look at this situation. What do you know? Because that's knowledge. What do you know? Well, I know I can't go back to that place. Okay, so to be wise, make a wise choice. What do you do? How do you correctly use that knowledge? Well, I'll probably find somewhere and not go back there. Okay, that's a wise choice in its simplistic form, right? So when did you know that? Because that's a real hard thing for us as therapists, is getting guys. A lot of people think, oh, I'll be fine. No, I got what I need. I'll be fine going back into that same environment.
No, like a lot of the guys that I was in treatment with when they were there, as soon as they left and went home, I heard the next day they used, and they were swearing up and down that they weren't going to go back to it. I lived in 2 cities at once. I lived in Los Angeles for a while, and then I would go back to Las Vegas. And as soon as I'd cross state line, I'd feel my heart start palpitating. My ears almost start ringing. While I was telling myself for a week before that, oh, I'm just going to go, do what I need to do. So this time when I would think about going back to Vegas to visit, I would see if that started kicking in or not. But I would stay with someone to stay accountable.
Sure.
And then I just had to keep going back and just testing it a little by little, just like I said, baby steps on stuff. Yep. And then eventually now I can go and stay and be alone and be fine. Yeah, but there's no way at first that I could have gone back and then just like been, oh, I'm good now.
And a lot of guys think that they can do that. They could just go right back, and a lot of times it's hard when you have, especially when you have family members that use, girlfriends that use, it's tough because drawing a boundary can be difficult, right? It can be very difficult, especially with people that you love or old friends, people that you went to high school with, whatever that looks like. It's very, very tough to draw boundaries sometimes. And, I tell the guys, the very definition of a boundary is loving yourself enough at the risk of upsetting someone else, right? You have to say, hey, Mom, you can't bring the 6-pack over for Thanksgiving. Whatever that looks like, right? And a lot of times guys have a hard time doing that, but they have to learn to draw those boundaries. And like you were saying, those small attainable goals. Early on in treatment, we try to tell the guys, hey, baby steps, man. Baby steps. Jump this hurdle, jump this hurdle, jump this hurdle. And when you string a bunch of baby steps together, you got progress.
That's it right there.
It's just because that builds confidence. It builds self-esteem. Self-worth is a big one. A lot of guys come in and just mired in shame and guilt, and and it's crushing to them. And it's like, how do I ever get my self-worth? And well, first off, you got to forgive yourself. You can't change a single thing from this moment past. Can't do anything about it. Come to terms with it. Whatever that looks like for you, we can work through that. But moving forward, you can change everything. And just getting them to believe that. If there's something internally, that light bulb goes off, and they're just like, hey, you know what? I am worth this. And a lot of times guys come in and they don't feel that. They just don't.
We don't usually have those boundaries towards the end of our addiction because we've hurt so many people that we don't feel like we really deserve to have boundaries or just tell people like, no, I can't do this or whatever. But figuring out boundaries is the way that you get out of codependency, which a lot of addicts have and a lot of people that are related to addicts have. Yeah. And you got to break that, because that right there can lead you back in a way, because anything that other person does that can upset you, you're going to go ahead and it's an excuse to use.
100% excuse to use. And we try to teach you guys, hey, you are going to be bombarded with emotions. You're going to be bombarded with opinions and criticism and everything when you go home, right? Depending on where you're going, you have to be mindful and aware of what you've learned, who you are, what your triggers are, what stresses you out, all of that. And it's a step-by-step process. Like you were saying, the 30 days, it's very tough to get all that in and be aware of it in 30 days.
Yeah, because you're still detoxing a little bit. You're still,
your
brain's
levels
still getting right.
Yeah, your brain chemicals are still leveling out.
I had to set up boundaries with people that I loved or whatever, and it started causing friction, but it worked itself out. It made everything better for me. It made everything manageable in the way I wanted it to for so long. If I just stopped using drugs, that it would have fixed all the problems, because that's what they were all mad at me for. But there was so much more to it.
Be present, focus on the present, but you also have to look ahead. And we get them as they get, the full detox, they start going through the program. We have them look out ahead and what does life look like for you outside of here? What does it look like? For me, the boundaries was a big thing. So, I was on the streets 7-8 years strong, right? In and out of rehabs, in and out of jails, in and out of institutions, and the whole deal. I was, a fugitive from the law more times than I can count, and, probation and jumping through all these hoops. The one constant during all of that time was my mother. My mother always had faith in me, right? Always had faith that I was going to turn out to be the man that she raised me to be, because I didn't touch drugs or alcohol till after I graduated high school. So I was a late bloomer, so to speak, in that sense. I just fell off the deep end and fell off the deep end hard. But she was there for, when I remember the very first time I got sentenced to the county jail for, I don't know, whatever it was, 30 days, my whole family was there.
Yeah.
Right? My whole family was in the audience, getting up and speaking, my boss, everybody was there. The next time, it was a little bit less. To where when the judge finally sentenced me to prison, and this is, a sentencing judge, I'd been going in front of him for 7 years, right? And I'd been in front of some form or another. My mom was the only one in the audience. Back to that boundary piece. So I get out of prison. I know that I'm finished. I get out of prison, and I meet my wife relatively quickly, and we get engaged, and everything's great, and we get married. Well, my mother just always expected this blind loyalty to her. Now, me and my mom's relationship is fine, but there was this really 10-year period of my marriage where my mother came before my wife did. And I was completely unaware. My mom would manipulate me to get my 8-year-old twin boys, and my mom would manipulate me to get things with the twins. And I have an older son that I had left when I went to prison. He was, a year and a half old, something like that. And it was just this really weird dynamic to where I just didn't even see it. My wife, it would be so hard on her because she'd be like, "Honey, do you not see what is happening here, right?" And I'm like, no. I would argue. My mom would call me at work, and she'd be like, "Hey, I didn't like the way, your wife did this, and yada, 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 yada. Maybe we should change this up." And I would go home, and I'd be like, "Hey, we need to change this." My wife would be like, "What?" Right? So it just, one day, God revealed to me, "Hey, you realize that you for 10 years, you put your wife through hell being second, right? And she's held on this long, right?" And so I had to draw that boundary with my mother.
Well, how'd that go with your mom?
Oh, dude. I just had to tell her, "Hey, here's the deal. No longer will you be first in my life, right? My wife and our family comes first. Her feelings validated. Mom, I love you and thank you for always being there for me." And she was, to her credit, she was the last man standing when it came to belief in me, right? She was the last man standing. But I always felt like I had to atone for the sins against her, right? Because addiction's not a victimless crime, right? You affect everybody in your family, whether it's kids and spouses or parents, and it affects everybody around you. And I always felt like, because she was the last person there, that I always had to atone, right? Atone at one with, just atone for those sins against her. And so there was just this loyalty to her because I felt that's what I had to do. And it took, it took almost divorce to really have God reveal to me, "You realize this is the problem. Are you ready to see it?" Because, he reveals things to us. I wish it would it would have been 10 years earlier, but the way that it worked is me and my wife were in a better place than we've ever been now. But it took that. Now me and my mom, I talk to my mom all the time and everything's fine, but there was this hard conversation you have to have where, hey, no more. I pay you back by never going back to that lifestyle again. I can't pay you monetarily. I can't pay you in any other way other than just never putting you through it again. Right? And there's a lot of times the guys will come into the center and they won't know how to pay back the people that they've hurt. And there's that shame there, there's that guilt there, there's that regret, there's all of these emotions surrounding the people they've hurt once they get clean. Because when you're out running a gun, you don't care. You might care, but it's not the first thing you're thinking about. When you get clean, that's when the tears start coming, right? And they're like, oh my gosh, my kids probably want to know where their dad is. My wife wants her husband back, right? And our goal as therapists and people that are Christ followers, our job is to provide an environment that you can bring a son back to a mother, a husband back to a wife, right? To bring a father back to the kids. And we wholeheartedly try to do that and carry that mission each and every day. It happened. The one thing that's unique, I think, about Holdfast, and which I love, is everybody over there has been through it. I didn't learn what it was like to be an addict from a book. And I can speak honestly about what it's like to be homeless and burn tires and 50-gallon drums to stay warm at night. I can live in shelters. I can talk about what it's like to be incarcerated, to have loss, to watch friends OD. I can talk about all of that. And it lends credibility to these guys. And I don't want to sound like people that go to school to be therapists and have never experienced addiction firsthand don't do good work. I'm just saying the uniqueness of Holdfast is everybody's over there has experienced and recovered from addiction, trauma, PTSD, whatever it looks like. Everybody over there has.
So you can trust them. I'm not saying that. I mean, we had a lot of therapists there that didn't have a past. They gave great advice.
Yeah.
But to explain to somebody that compulsion of wanting to use that they've never had and never experienced before, and then trying to explain something that's unexplainable in a way to where they understand it, you trust it more coming from somebody that's gone through it. With Holdfast, I remember as soon as I started detoxing, I had that same shame and guilt from the people that I hurt.
Yeah.
When we go out and it's going to hurt us more to not get the drugs than to deal with the guilt later, and then we usually will drown that guilt out with the drugs and alcohol or whatever our drug of choice is. I wasn't going to leave, but I can see how that shame and guilt will make people want to leave early, because I just remember, now that I'm feeling better, I want to go fix things.
Yeah.
I'm stuck here, but I want to go fix things. But I just had to wait it out, and to be honest, it was the best decision of my life. Just taking advice from people that have gone through it and are ready to help you.
Yeah, my goal was, I got out of prison and I was like, you know what? I was always meant for more than this, right? So I was like, okay, what am I going to do here? Because my family owns a large construction company, so I was just always a blue-collar dude, right? And I would do drywall every day, and I made a good living, and and I was building schools, and I was building, where kids can learn, and hospitals where people get help, and there's honor in that. I was going to school every day, and there's honor in that. But I felt like there was just something more that I was supposed to do. So what I did was, I said, okay, I'm going to go to school. So I go on to get my undergrad degree in criminal justice, because my dream was to go to law school. Well, then my wife's pregnant with twins, right around. So I'm like, okay. So I kind of was just like, God, what do you want me to do? Law school's so demanding, and my wife didn't sign up to be a single mom type thing, right? And I didn't want to be stuck in a law library, doing, constitutional doc review for, some lawyer somewhere. So 12 hours a day. So I'm like, what do you want me to do? And I just felt this overwhelming sensation of, hey, how about you take your past to maybe try to help somebody's future? And it was a simple transition for me. I was like, okay, pretty simple message. So that's what I did. And now I can come from the guy sitting across from me, I can come from an empathetic as well as a sympathetic piece, right? I can say, hey, I feel what you're going through, man, but you know what? I've also been there. And so it's very helpful for me to be able to help somebody with my education. And I can sit there and talk about neurotransmitters and all this clinical stuff, right? I can use my education to give you answers to why you're doing what you're doing for me, a chemical standpoint or, a behavioral standpoint. But I can also help just as many people with my experiences. And a lot of people that have never been through that, they miss that part of it, right? So I feel like God led me down a road that I have both parts to help them with, experience and education, which I feel lends not only credibility, but it really helps, because there's times where I'm leaning on my education and I'm like, okay, man, this guy, like cognitively, he's at this level, and I'm thinking, my brain's going, and then the simple answer is, hey, man, tell him at this point in your life this happened, right? And then you'll see that light bulb go off. Yeah, because I'll be thinking about my education and like going back to textbooks and all this stuff, and then it's like, why don't you just share with them a time you went through that, and I can do that, and then they're just like, oh my gosh, yeah, that relatability piece. It's just, I've helped just as many people with my experiences I have with my education, and I love what I do, just for that, just to see the change in them. The 90 days, so these guys will come in broken, and I choke up and I cry at every single graduation, right? Yeah. Because I get choked up even talking about it.
It's emotional, man.
It is so emotional for me, because to see them come in so broken is, statistically speaking, from a statistical standpoint, every single one of those guys is, it's a miraculous thing. It's statistically a miracle that they've completed or done something for the amount of time that they've done, and to see them on what they look like on graduation day is to when they came in, and how broken. I'm sitting there I'll sit there day 1, day 2, I'll be doing a full biopsycho assessment on them, and you get to the family portion and they just break down and will start crying, because they're so fresh off the boat. They're charged up. They've gone through detox. They've been clean 72 hours. And they're already starting to realize how they've hurt people. Their kids want to know where their dad is. Their wife is at home trying to cover the bills, or they've stole everything from grandma, and whatever it looks like. And they just break down. They just break down. We get to the spiritual part of the assessment. It's like, hey, do you believe in God? Yeah. Do you use prayer in your life? Yeah. They just start breaking down. 90 days later, man, they're spiritually, mentally, emotionally healthy. They still have work to do, but they've got all of those demons just sorted through. They put in the work, and they're proud of themselves, and they should be proud of themselves. And there's nobody more proud than me up there. See, I get I get choked up thinking about it. I cry every single time.
Yeah, I've been to a lot of the graduations too, and they bring their parents and their kids, and everyone's crying, and
yeah.
I remember guys coming in the beginning and then going to their graduation at the end, and I know exactly what you're talking about, just seeing the difference or whatever in the change. And they'll come in and they'll start saying like, I don't know about God, like I'm trying, like, I just don't. And then to how they end up at the end, where you can just see that life and fire in them. That was extremely impactful for me, just because I could see what I was also a part of.
Yes.
Like, this is where I need to be at.
Yep.
God's making an impact with a lot of people here.
Yeah.
And it's just going to keep branching out.
Yep, that's exactly right. And the newer guys come in and they see these other guys graduate, because so we don't have a phase type house. So it's like all the phase 1s together, all the phase 2. We don't segregate them like that. Everybody's in there together, whether you're phase 3, whether you're in sober living, or whether you're in phase 1, fresh from detox. What's great is the guys that are a couple weeks in are seeing guys graduate, and those guys that are graduating get to help these guys. And there's something about giving back that these guys find, just so rewarding.
That was motivation for me, was seeing right when I came in, about 3 guys graduated right away. I was like, man, I hope I can do that. I hope nothing goes wrong. I hope I can stay on that track. And seeing that was inspiration for me to dive deeper into my vulnerability with people, and to just start trusting and start doing the opposite of everything I was doing in the past. And it turns out to be hard work at some point, because you got to really dig at stuff that the emotions are hurting you, and you don't want to think about that.
About a week or 2 weeks in, when they kind of detoxify and they start getting levels, they get some food in their belly, because that 2-week mark, it's when it gets sketchy for some guys, because, okay, now you got to start owning your crap, right? Now you got to, okay, so we're in group, you're all good, you're settled in, you understand the routine, you understand how things work, where you're living, you met some people. So now let's start working. And you start working on yourself. And a lot of times there's so much baggage. A lot of guys, it's easier to go use. It's easier to go disassociate from those feelings than it is to face them head on, deal with them, admit them, own them, and do something with them, right? But those guys, that work through all of that, I mean, just to see the change over that 90 days. And then the guys that get, just to see the doors that God opens for guys, when they get to sober living, and they don't have to come to the center, but all of them still stay a part of the circles at night, or they'll stay a part of the Bible study or elements or that type. They stay connected, and that's huge for guys, man. That accountability and that fellowship is such an important and key piece for the sustainability of long-term recovery. It just really is crucial, especially that first. We like to see 9 months of that. I mean, 3 months in, 9 months in sober living, or plugged in somewhere but still staying accountable, to give yourself a good year of straight accountability.
It takes one guy in the house to say, oh, you know what, I want to, you know, like, and start putting out toxic vibes with everyone there. Yeah. But then it also takes just one guy to say, no, let's stick together on this.
Yep.
And that's what I got lucky doing, because I was in the house with guys that were trying to actually get sober.
Yeah.
And we would help each other when we were down, and we just kept picking each other back up.
And everybody's going to have, everybody's going to have good days and everybody's going to have bad days. It's just the way that it works. And that's through life, right? And it's meeting life on life's terms, and there's going to be days it's harder. That fellowship is a big part of that, where, if you have natural leaders in the house, not everybody's a natural leader, and that's okay. I was a follower. That's what got me in trouble to begin with. I was a follower my whole life, and I always wanted to fit into a fault. If you were doing drugs, I'll do them with you just because you're showing me some acceptance, right? And so it wasn't until, well after prison, that I was like, dude, you got 2 feet, stand on them, be your own person. It's okay if take me for who I am, take it or leave it type mentality. And a lot of these guys come in and they're, because we have older guys, career guys, first responders, been doing it a long time. And then we have 18-year-old kids come in. And it's like, there's this weird age gap, but the common denominator is they both need help for substance use. And so that common denominator holds them together. I did at U.S. Vets, I did an internship with at a homeless veterans facility, and they it's funny because you would have 20-year-old kid, 22-year-old kids, just did 4 years, got an alcohol problem, come in after they discharged from the military, and then you'd have these 60 years, Vietnam vets. Huge age gap. Thing is, the common denominator here was they were all veterans, and so they would have their fun games. What branch? Army. Oh, Navy's waiting. They would always talk crap to each other in that sense, but they were all veterans, right? So that's we try to instill in these guys. Hey, man, older guys help the younger guys keep the older guys moving. There's this whole, and they all just join together. Now, there's times where you have your problem child, right? Everybody, you're not. It's not perfect all the time. And as staff, we have to, remind people of expectations, hold them accountable, whatever that looks like. But we have a really high success rate in just keeping guys together. And that's really what we like, is keeping the houses together, unified, helping one another, uplifting one another. Somebody's got a down day, 2 guys lift them up. Guys get stuck all the time. And the longer you're out there, you get stuck into this mindset of, being or acting or presenting, performing a certain type of way, and getting those guys to take that veneer off, that street veneer, if you will, that convict veneer, whatever that looks like. And just, a lot of times the first responders even have this tough guy veneer, right? And it's like, I can handle anything. Okay, that getting that humility, getting that vulnerability piece to really play a part, man, it says so much it helps. It just helps open you up. If you can unpack emotionally, man, it's one thing to come into recovery and be like, yeah, well, I saw this and I experienced this and I'm really struggling with this and I got a bad relationship with my mom and I got kind of some anger issues. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, you get that, but it's okay, man. Tell me some more behind that. That's all surface level stuff, and it's great, and it's necessary to talk about that, and I'll validate that. But why are you getting angry? Like, why are you? What's the reason behind that?
That was a huge key. Was finding out what our negative cognitive belief was.
Yeah.
A lot of guys would be like, well, why do you use drugs? And they're like, I associate, I have a good time. I like you doing drugs. I'm like, no, you're going to have to go a little bit further if you want any healing at all.
Nobody wakes up with a perfectly good life and says, you know what? I'm going to go try some heroin today. Nobody does that. Nobody looks up on the internet how to smoke fentanyl and goes and just does it, right? You're disassociating from something you don't want to deal with to some degree. The vast majority of our cases are troubled childhood, absent parents, abusive, sexual abuse, physical trauma as a child, bullying. There's a lot of things that can cause somebody to turn into an alcoholic or a drug addict. It's getting them to dig into that, right? So you have that metaphorical shovel. When they come in and they sit down in front of me, it's like, okay, there's your shovel. Here's my shovel. Let's start digging. Metaphorically, let's start digging until we get, to some touchstone incidents, right? And we can start talking about negative cognitions and positive outlooks and that kind of thing moving forward. But before we start talking about that, we need to figure out what caused you to use, right? Because you have, it's the old adage of the root and the weed, right? I mean, like, I could come out to a weed and I could pull a leaf off the weed and be like, sweet, I got that, but it's still there, right? Until you pull that root, pull it out at the root, it's not going to go away. So you got to dig and dig and dig until you get down to those root causes of why you used to begin with. What caused you to go? Was it because you didn't have a dad growing up? Was it because you were in a performance and controlling based home growing up, and you just one thing they couldn't control, and now you can control? Like, what is it? What caused you to use? Somebody die? Was it loss? What was it? Right? A lot of times guys have a hard time talking about that. They want to come in and be fixed. And I tell them all the time, hey man, just so you know, let's get this straight right out the gate. People don't fix people, right? People fix themselves. I can guide you and provide an environment for you to do that. But you getting better is predicated on you and the willingness. You can't expect me to work harder at your recovery than you, right? So how willing, dedicated, and devoted are you to changing your life from this day forward? Because the cool part about all this could be the last time you're in rehab. A lot of it I found too is environmental. Like for me, I'll do this relapse realization technique to where for chronic relapsers, I'll have them talk about right before they relapse what happened. Go through all your relapses. What happened right before? Was it what made you relapse? What made you think and then go act on that? Was it a fight with your mom and then a fight with your girlfriend years later, and then your girlfriend breaks up with you or your dog dies? Was it emotionally driven? Because you can come to a common denominator. For me, my entire drug use history, all 7 years, wholeheartedly, because I came from a loving, non-broken, no drug use, no abuse of any kind home, right? Wasn't controlling. I was pretty free to do whatever I want growing up, and mine was environmental, 100%. I became a product of the environments that I was in.
When I was at Elements and I saw your testimony, you said you had 16 years clean at one time?
Yep.
What made you want to go back to using after?
Remember when I was talking about the whole situation with my mom?
Yeah.
That whole situation, it got to the point to where my wife was like, hey, I can't live like this anymore, right? I can't live like this anymore. And so when I was ill-equipped on an emotional level to deal with that. And so it was one of those things where it was like cunning, baffling, powerful is what they say, right? 17 and a half years. The first thing I thought of was, hey, I'm not getting accepted at home. I've had to draw these boundaries with my mom. I'm going to go, and I started hanging out with people that were users. Now, it took me a while. I was working out of town a lot. I was never home, so that predicated a lot because me and my wife were doing this. Sure enough, once again, like all those years passed, I became a product of the environment that I was in because that's where I got my acceptance from.
Did you just start like drinking at first?
Yeah, it just led.
Yep. Snowballed right back into the whole
exactly,
deal.
Exactly.
That's what I talk about on here was just letting things slide. I know if I go back and I start drinking, which has happened in the past, I'm like, I can still drink just a little bit.
Yeah.
And then that only lasts for so long.
Yeah.
And then you start smoking weed, and you're like, I know what else I'd like to smoke.
Yeah.
It's just not cutting it until you get finally back to where you were at, where your brain feels comfortable at.
And that's that's why so many people, especially on heroin, opioids, the fentanyl, a lot of people will get clean, and that's where a lot of the overdoses come from. There's a lot of guys who get clean, and when they go back out and they relapse with the same amount they were doing back here. And so their body is not equipped to deal with that tolerance.
Yeah, because your brain is still saying to you, oh, this is how much it takes to get this
high.
high.
Yep.
And I want to feel this way. So I'm going to use this much.
And it's like
buries
overdose.
Yeah.
Yep, too much. Yeah.
What was the last straw for you for when you were using this time?
Yep.
What made you want to get back on track and start helping guys?
It's weird because I had this like 3-month stretch where I was using. It started off small, went full bore by the end of it, right? And it was getting arrested again. And I'm in this holding cell. And I'm like, what am I doing here again? I look around, I put my hands out on the walls, right? And I can touch them all four. And I'm just like, never in a million years would I've ever thought this is where I would be right now. After 17 years clean. And it was just the wake-up call of all wake-up calls, right? And that was it. I was just like, what am I doing? And so, I mean, I had that 3-month stretch where I had got home, I'd got out of jail, I'd gone home, and I looked at my wife and said, dude, we have to reconnect. We have to. So boundaries drawn where they needed to be drawn. Work, no more out of town. I had no relationship with my kids or my wife because of this, because I put work first, right? So no more out of town, no more putting anything first other than my family. You know, our family's our first ministry, and I was failing at that. And so when I just had that wake up call, and, and it's one of those things where God said, hey, here's the deal. Here's your chance. Here's your wake up call. Now go do something with this, right? And so it was just a rededication to my family. It was a rededication to the covenant that I took, the vows that I took to my wife, to cherish and honor her, to raise our kids, to be a dad. And I wasn't going to make the same mistakes that I made 17, 20 years prior, right? And so it's such a testament that recovery is possible, but it also is a testament to how powerful the disease is. Cunning, baffling, powerful. That disease waited. I didn't struggle with a trigger. I was literally living in a state of transcendence. I didn't care for it. I didn't envy it. I didn't have dreams. Nothing. After 17 and a half years. Boom. Right back to where I was 20 years ago, right? And cunning, baffling, powerful. That disease waited until I was at my emotional lowest to say, hey, I'm still here. I'm right here.
That was so scary. That's why I remember that from your testimony.
Yeah.
And I still think about it. And we talked about it. You said that about a year ago.
Yeah.
And I've thought about that. I can't let that stuff slip because I knew this guy and he gave his testimony. He said he went 16 years without doing any drugs and it still got him. So I'm like, that's why I don't let anything start to slide. And I do a 10th step or my own version of a 10th step every night just to kind of see where I messed up at because I'm still afraid of going backwards because I respect the disease so much.
Yeah, and that's it. A lot of guys that come into recovery, they don't respect the disease. They think once they get clean, they got it licked. And I'm here to tell you not the case. You can go and sit in rooms, NA, AA meetings all day, all night and hear stories of 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years clean and something happens. 17 years clean, your dog dies. Emotionally, you can't handle it. And the only way to get away from those emotions is your old friend, the bottle, right? Because it's always there. And to not respect that and to get complacent with it, it's a very, very dangerous way to go.
How you were in that jail cell, like how did I get here? I felt that too many times for real, and I don't want to feel like that again. So I've had to, while I was at Holdfast, map out how it got to that point too, and figure out that these are certain things that I need to watch out for, and then I just constantly work on them. Following that routine has made me stay
and
sober.
that mentality is something that is going to be different for everybody. It's so helpful for me to be doing what I'm doing because it is a reminder. It's a constant reminder. These guys come in. It's a constant reminder of how quick I could be where they're at. I could be in that chair that they're in, talking to somebody like me now. I could be there in a week, right? If I let the disease get me there.
It's a trip to see that used to be you in certain cases. When I see new guys coming in and everything, and I remember sitting in that seat and having someone else talk to me, and I'm like, man, I wish I could be like them. I wish I could get it. And it's just weird to where we're at the point in our life now to where we can be on that opposite side of the fence.
And I tell the guys that, and this is that credibility piece, right? I tell the guys when they're sitting there and they're like, oh, you know, what about you? What's your deal? So I'll tell them a little bit about me, right? And I'll say, hey, just so you know, I've been in that chair more than I've been in this one. Just so you know, right? Like I'm somebody you can trust and somebody you can talk to. Here's a funny story, maybe to end up on. I was working at the homeless shelter for veterans, and this was one of the most surreal moments. I'm sitting there, and I was doing my internship for my master's, and I'm in a group session, and there's 10, 15 guys, and I'm running the group, and this guy comes in. He sits down, middle-aged dude, sits down, new guy's coming and going all the time. I'm like, okay, this is a homeless facility, right? But the only stipulation is you got to be a veteran, right? So guy comes in, sits down, and I finish the group up, and at the end of the group, I see that as the group is going, he comes in halfway through. He's kind of giving me that look. And I was kind of giving him the same look, like, where do I know this guy from, right? So anyways, at the end of the group, I'm like, hey, John, like, you want to kind of tell everybody new here today, you know, just get here today. Hey, you want to tell everybody kind of about yourself, whatever, if you're going to be joining us, you know, throughout the week. And he goes, yeah, you know, I'm here for alcohol. I just never done any other drugs, but alcohol, I've lost everything. I lost my wife. I lost my full pension. I was in Department of Corrections for 14 years, and you know, I lost everything, right? So I'm thinking, man, this dude was in prison for 14 years. It's a long time, right? And then when he said I lost my pension, I realized he wasn't in the Department of Corrections as an inmate. He was a cop there. He was a CO. And I was like, and right there, it hit me. Because you get full pension at 15 years or something like that, you know. But he got his third DUI or second DUI, and he got fired at 14 years. So he lost his pension, everything he'd worked for, lost it all. Wife, everything left him, the whole deal. He's literally in a homeless shelter. And he looks at me and he goes, hey, you were on the maintenance crew in San Luis. And I go, and you were a cop on the yard where I was an inmate at. And he was like, and you just see this just defeat come over his face. And you want to talk about a surreal moment of role reversal? Like, he was a cop. When I was in prison on a yard, he was the cop there, and he remembered me, and I remembered him. We hadn't seen each other in almost 20 years, but there he was in a homeless facility due to alcohol, got his second, third DUI. So it was one of those moments, and of course I tell him, hey, this isn't one of those times where you need to be shameful, right? This is one of those times where you need to look at me and say, hey, change is possible. Because the last time you saw me, you were locked in my cell at night, right? And you were going home to your family. Albeit you were going home and drinking a 30-pack every night. But you still need to realize change is possible. Yeah, there's always wiggle room for rock bottom. I tell guys that all the time. Everybody always thinks I thought I was at rock bottom every time I got arrested, right? There's always wiggle room, right?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. You feel like you're at your lowest, right? He's like, yeah. And I said, okay, work up from here. Only way to go is up. And just understand that change is possible. Look at what I'm doing now, right? And so he's like, okay, man. It was a very surreal moment for me because it's everywhere. Addiction and substance usage, it's everywhere. The people you wouldn't think. You know, I never would a million years would have thought.
I bet you he was hoping that he was nice to you.
Yeah,
he's like, I never screw that guy over while I was
I'm not approving this program for you, dude. I've had a hard journey, right? I've had a really hard journey. And if there's one thing that I could leave with you, it's always try to find the positive in anything that you're doing. Anything that you're doing, good and bad, negative, positive, they're on opposite sides of the same coin. So you got to always try to find the positive and understand that just because you've had a hard or tumultuous past, bad upbringing, absent parents, abuse of any kind, God's got a purpose for you in your life. God has a dynamic purpose for you. Understand this, you can never step into your future if you're unwilling to step out of your past. And a negative mind will never result in a positive life, ever. It won't do it. A negative mind will never result in a positive life. So understand, try to find the positive in every situation you find yourself in, no matter what it might be, and do your best to come to terms with, forgive yourself for past mistakes, and step into that future that God's got for you. If there's any advice I could give anybody, that's what it would be.
I admire how you come up from Phoenix all the way up here every day. That's, like I said, some commitment, man, to
hour and a half
help others.
drive. Yep.
And you're sharing the right message with the guys. You're giving them hope. And I'm sure people there admire you and are inspired by the stories that you have.
I hope so. And I think it's a great thing that you're doing here and getting the word out. This is great, man. This is really cool stuff.
But anyways, guys, if you have any questions for Richard, either drop it down in the comments or email me at recovhubpodcast@gmail.com, and I'll send it his way. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.